Hello, this is John Fletcher, and welcome to the John Rion channel. I chose Rion as a name because I wanted to be a communicator to bring forth the truth, because it's amazing when you hear the truth that was said in the past, you can look at the present and see how it is actually playing out in today's society. So Rion means language, and if we look at today's society, you can see how individuals are using language and changing certain word meanings to bring us in to a false understanding what the foundation of our own country here in the United States of America was built upon. So let's take a listen to the truth from Dan Smoot, 1966, April 18th, as he explains clearly and precisely about the foundation of America. Because we are living in a time where you can see exactly what he is talking about here from 1966 playing out today in 2023. And I hope this video reaches all who love truth, receive truth, and share truth. And don't forget to like the truth. Seek the truth daily. The truth will find you seeking.
A democracy is a political system in which the people periodically, by majority vote at the polls, select their rulers. The rulers then have absolute power to make whatever laws they please by majority vote among themselves. In a constitutional republic, the people also, by majority vote at the polls, select rulers who make laws by majority vote among themselves. But the rulers cannot make any laws they please because the Constitution severely restricts their lawmaking power. The ideal of a democracy is universal equality. The ideal of a constitutional republic is individual liberty. In this century, great strides have been made toward the goal of subverting our republic and transforming it into a democracy. The foremost tactic of the subverters is subversion of language. By calling America a democracy until people thoughtlessly accept and use the term, totalitarians have obscured the real meaning of American principles of government. Note the following passages from a recent article distributed by the New York Times News Service. Quote, "In the United States and in other leading democracies, recent years have seen perceptible growth in executive authority. As society becomes more equalitarian, it tends increasingly to concentrate absolute power in the hands of one single man. This is a voluntary surrender of a free people escaping from freedom to one autocratic master." End quote. James Madison said, "Such democracies have ever been incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. A republic promises the cure for which we are seeking." Madison, known as the father of the Constitution, knew and said that enlightened men will not always be at the helm of government to serve as proper guardians of the public weal. He knew that unlimited political power cannot safely be entrusted to the nation's elected representatives to use as a majority of them see fit, because, he said, a majority of a group of men is far more likely to be tyrannical than one man is. In a democracy, if a majority should develop hatred for all blue-eyed babies and order them eliminated, the babies could be legally executed, because whatever a majority wants at any given moment is supreme law of the land in a democracy. How can liberty be safeguarded against the mindless, soulless tyranny of majority rule when government is founded on the principle of majority rule? Jefferson answered that one, "In questions of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution." In short, America was founded not as a democracy, but as a constitutional republic. We pledge allegiance to the republic for which our flag stands, not to a democracy. The Constitution requires a republican form of government for all states, but does not mention democracy, and neither does the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights. The Constitution is a binding contract, enumerating limited powers which the federal government can legally exercise, prohibiting it from exercising any powers not granted in the contract. It denies federal officials the power to do whatever they claim to be necessary for the general welfare. Federal action not clearly authorized by the Constitution is illegal, even if approved by an overwhelming majority of the people, because all the elastic powers of government are left with the states. Ultimate power to change the organic structure of government was left with the people. But the means of making changes, amending the Constitution, were carefully prescribed to militate against hasty, unwise decisions by the people. As Benjamin Franklin left the State House in Philadelphia on the closing day of the Constitutional Convention, a woman asked him what kind of government the convention had given America. And Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." Very old and very wise, Franklin saw through the mists of time to the day when Americans might trade their freedom in a constitutional republic for the promise of government guaranteed equality and security in a democracy. And beyond that, to the day when democracy inevitably degenerates into dictatorship, guaranteeing nothing but poverty and serfdom for the people it robs and rules. The American constitutional system, unique in history, enabled Americans to develop a backward continent into the most magnificent nation of all time. The system was designed to prevent both tyranny by government and reckless rebellion by the people. We must restore it and keep it. And what can you do toward that end? Your job, you who care and understand, is to help educate others.
Eventually, all 13 states ratified the Constitution, and then each ratified the first 10 amendments known as the Bill of Rights, further tying the hands of the federal government. These amendments are indeed about rights, but it would have been better had the Bill of Rights been labeled the Bill of Limitations on Government. Why? Because it's vital to realize that the Bill of Rights never gave citizens any rights whatsoever. Its sole purpose was to safeguard God-given rights by limiting government power. The founders even insisted that Congress shall make no law about speech, religion, the press, assembly, the right to petition, the right to keep and bear arms, and so on. These amendments are directed squarely at the federal government, not the individual and not the states. They are like most of the 10 Commandments, which are essentially thou shalt nots. The Bill of Rights says Congress shall not, all the way up to the marvelous 10th Amendment, which says in effect, if we forgot anything, you can't do that either. When Benjamin Franklin exited the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman, "Sir, what have you given us?" His immediate response was, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Yet most Americans today have been persuaded that our nation's governmental system is a democracy and not a republic. The difference between these two is essential in understanding Americanism and the American system. Before we discuss political systems, however, it's helpful to address the confusion that has been spread about the political spectrum. Many have been led to believe that the political spectrum places groups such as communists on the far left, fascists or dictators on the far right, and political moderates or centrists in the middle. However, a more accurate political spectrum will show government having 0 power on the far right to having 100% power on the far left. At the extreme right, there is no government. The extreme left features total government under such labels as communism, socialism, Nazism, fascism, princes, potentates, dictators, kings, any form of total government. Those who claim that Nazis and fascists are right-wing never define their terms. This amounts to spreading confusion. Toward the middle of the political spectrum can be found the type of government limited to its proper role of protecting the rights of the people. That's where the Constitution of the United States is. Those who advocate such a form of government are really constitutional moderates. So let's analyze the basic forms of government. They are monarchy or dictatorship ruled by one, oligarchy ruled by a few, democracy ruled by a majority, republic ruled by law, and anarchy, which is ruled by no one. In discussing these 5, we'll see that they can be narrowed down to even fewer. Looking first at monarchy or dictatorship, this form of government doesn't really exist in the practical sense. It's always a group that puts one of its members up front. A king has his council of nobles or earls, and every dictator has his bureaucrats or commissars, the men behind the scenes. This isn't ruled by one, even though one person may be the visible leader. It's ruled by a group. So let's eliminate monarchy, dictatorship, because it never truly exists. Oligarchy, which is ruled by a group, is the most common form of government in all history, and it is the most common form of government today. Most of the nations of the world are ruled by a powerful few, and therefore oligarchy remains. At the other end, we find anarchy, which means without government. Some people have looked over history and found that many of its worst crimes were committed by governments, so they decided that having no government might be a good idea. But this is a mistake, because as the ancient Greeks stated, without law there can be no freedom. Our founding fathers agreed and held that some amount of government is a necessary force in any civilized, orderly society. In a state of anarchy, however, everyone has to guard life, liberty, and property, and the lives of family members. Everyone must be armed, and movement is severely restricted because one's property has to be protected at all times. Civilized people have always hired someone to do the guarding, a sheriff, a police force, or some branch of government. Once law enforcement was in place, the people were freer. They could leave their property, work in the fields, and so on. In short, the proper amount of government makes everyone freer. There are some who advocate anarchy, however, not because they want no government, but because they don't like what they have. They use anarchy as a tool for revolutionary change. The condition of anarchy is very much like a vacuum where something rushes in to fill it. These calculating anarchists work to break down the existing government with rioting, killing, looting, and terrorism. Tragically, the people living in such chaos often go to those best able to put an end to it and beg them to take over and restore order. And who is best able to put an end to the chaos? The very people who started it. The anarchists who created the problem then create a government run by them, an oligarchy, where they have total power. This is exactly what happened in Russia that led to Lenin taking total power, and in Germany where Hitler's brown shirts created the chaos that brought him to power. But anarchy isn't a stable form of government. It's a quick transition from something that exists to something desired by the power-hungry. It's a temporary condition, and because it isn't permanent, we eliminate it as well. The word democracy comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratein, meaning to rule. Democracy, therefore, means the rule of the people, majority rule. This, of course, sounds good, but suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. Obviously, there has to be a limit. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained. If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule. What about republic? Well, that comes from the Latin, res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law. A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone. America's founders had a clean slate to write on. They could have set up an oligarchy. In fact, there were some who wanted George Washington to be their king. But the founding fathers knew history, and they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy. Why? Let's demonstrate the difference in the setting of the Old West. Consider a lynch mob in a democracy. 35 horseback riders chase one lone gunman. They catch him, and they vote 35-1 to hang him. Democracy has triumphed, and there's one less gunman to contend with. Now consider the same scenario in a republic. The 35 horseback riders catch the gunman and vote 35-1 to hang him, but the sheriff arrives, and he says, "You can't kill him. He's got his right to a fair trial." So they take the gunman back to town. A jury of his peers is selected, and they hear the evidence and the defense, and they decide if he shall hang. Does the jury even decide by majority rule? No, it has to be unanimous, or he goes free. The rights of the gunman aren't subject to majority rule, but to the law. This is the essence of a republic. Many Americans would be surprised to learn that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution, nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. The founders did everything they could to keep us from having a democracy. James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy." And John Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." The founders had good reason to look upon democracy with contempt, because they knew that the democracies in the early Greek city-states produced some of the wildest excesses of government imaginable. During that period in Greece, there was a man named Solon who urged creation of a fixed body of law not subject to majority whims. But where the Greeks never adopted Solon's wise counsel, the Romans did. Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law and, in effect, built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets, demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
We've also seen across the country violent attacks to pregnancy centers by similar left-wing terrorist groups, including one graffiti of a firebomb building said, "Jane was here." There have been attacks all over the country. And yet, the Department of Justice has not brought these violent criminals to justice. You contrast that. If you're a violent criminal and you attack a crisis pregnancy center, that is not a priority in the Biden Department of Justice. Contrast that to Mark Houck, who's a pro-life activist. He's a sidewalk counselor. And he had an altercation with someone who allegedly interfered with his son's personal space and threatened his son, and he pushed him. Now, in an ordinary world, pushing someone would be maybe a simple misdemeanor assault, but not under the Biden Department of Justice. If you're a pro-life activist, what can you expect? Well, in this instance, according to Mr. Houck's wife, 24 agents clad in body armor and ballistic helmets and shields and a battering ram showed up at his house pointing rifles at his family. Why do you send 24 agents in body armor to arrest a sidewalk counselor who happens to be pro-life, but you don't devote resources to prosecute people who are violently firebombing crisis pregnancy
It
centers?
is a priority of the department to prosecute and investigate and find the people who are doing those fire bombings. They are doing it at night and in secret. So, and we have found one group which we did prosecute.
You found one. How many have there been? How many attacks?
There have been a lot, and if you have any information specifically as to who those people are, we would be glad. We would be glad to have that.
Did you personally authorize 20 agents going to Mr. Houck's house? And he offered to turn himself in through counsel, but you didn't want that. The Department of Justice wanted to make a show of it. Did you personally authorize it? And do you want to apologize to Mrs. Houck and her 7 children for being terrorized?
The decisions about how to do that are made at the level of the FBI agents on scene.
Did you know about it?
I did not know about it until the way you're describing it, and my understanding is the FBI disagrees with that description.
Was it a mistake?
Senator's time has expired. I'm going to allow the witness to respond to any of the questions that were asked.
Was it a mistake?
I'm going to chair the committee, Senator. I'm sorry you're not.
You said you'd allow him to respond. I repeated the question I asked, which is, was it a mistake to send 20 agents to arrest him at the crack of dawn?
You had your time and more.
You just said you're going to allow him to respond. You just said, I'm going to allow him to respond to the question. So I repeated the question. Was it a mistake? That was the pending question.
You want to ask, I'll ask the questions I want.
That's the question I had already asked.
Well,
you just said you'd let him respond.
I'm going to let him respond right now. Please don't interrupt him. Thank you.
The decisions about how to do tactical arrests are made by the FBI agents in the field. The FBI has publicly stated that it disagrees with the description you gave of what happened in that example. That's the best I can answer.
Well, FBI agents raided the home of a pro-life father of 11 in Tennessee earlier this month. Paul Vaughn is the president of Tennessee Personhood. He and nearly a dozen other pro-lifers were arrested and charged with violating the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. The incident happened more than a year ago, and at that time, Vaughn was not arrested by local police, but now he faces up to 11 years in prison. And we go now to Peter Breen, Vice President and Senior Counsel at the Thomas More Society, who is defending Paul Vaughn. Peter, thanks so much for joining us again. We appreciate it. I mean, we talked to you just about, I think, 2 weeks ago regarding one of your clients, Mark Houck, who was raided by the FBI at his home in Pennsylvania. And now it seems it's the same situation for Paul Vaughn. What more can you tell us about what happened to Paul?
Well, and this is now painting a picture of an organized effort by the Biden Department of Justice to come after peaceful pro-life individuals with heavy artillery, long guns, bulletproof vests. In the case of Paul, his kids were actually outside about to get in the car to go to school, and an FBI agent with a long gun was holding them back as they were trying to effect an arrest for him. Paul was a totally peaceful person. As you noted, he wasn't even arrested for trespass. He didn't actually block the door of the clinic. So we're seeing folks who should not see a single agent in front of their door. We would bring them all down to the courthouse if the federal government really wants to arrest these folks. But what I can tell you is the point is to try to paint a picture for the public that pro-life people of faith, are somehow criminals, and that's not right. That is not the America that we know and love.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, as we saw the video right there, this unfolded in front of his wife and a number of his children. That had to be pretty traumatic for them. How are they doing?
Well, they are strong. They love the Lord, and they are they're healing together as a family. They are just like the Houck family, very strong, faith-filled family. As you said, 11 kids here, so obviously they are very good Bible-believing Christians. And so, look, they want to see us fight back hard against this injustice, so no other family. So that any of our families don't have to suffer through this same terrible, reckless and outrageous raids on our homes and things, just for expressing our First Amendment rights on the sidewalk and outside of the nation's abortion facilities.
I know I asked you this last time when we talked about Mark, but for those who may have not seen, can you talk to us just quickly about this FACE Act?
Right. So the point of the FACE Act was 1994, they were trying to stop the rescues. So that's blocking access to the abortion facilities. Now, that should not have been, that's not a federal policy, especially now post-Dobbs. There's no abortion right. But the law is still on the books. The Biden administration isn't just charging people under that law, though. They're adding extra charges. So that law provides for 6 months. It's a misdemeanor for a first offense. They're charging with additional laws that say you're trying to deprive people of their basic rights that carry 10-year felony prison sentences, longer than they will give to many violent criminals. They want to put peaceful pro-life people behind bars.
And we have about maybe a minute or so left, Peter, but quickly, what's next for this case? And also, where do you see all of this going?
Well, so for Paul Vaughn and his co-defendants, we're going to proceed to trial, most likely. We think Paul has strong defenses. He did not actually block the door, and he's got a First Amendment right to express himself and peacefully there at that abortion clinic. So we are going to fight strongly ahead with that with our whole Thomas More Society team. And look, nationwide, we are seeing FBI inquiries at other sidewalk counseling locations. We are going to fight hard. Our strategy is to do the same thing we did under the Obama administration. Win these cases. Give the DOJ, the Biden DOJ, a big black eye in the public. The Congress has already said they're going to investigate this. So hopefully that will be really a 1-2 punch to make sure they stop persecuting people of faith and good pro-life folks that just want to reach out to women in need and to express themselves, which is their First Amendment right.
Peter, now that Houck has been acquitted, he's been able to share more details about what happened at his home that early September morning last year. Houck has explained that his 7 children were terrorized by the scene. They had to watch their father be handcuffed, put in a police car, and violently arrested. Houck has also stated that he believes this would not have happened to him and his family if the Trump administration was still in office. Pro-life activist Mark Houck joins me now. Mark, hello, and congratulations on the recent verdict from the jury. We at EWTN have been praying for you, and we're really glad to welcome you onto the show today. Talk to me about why you've decided to sue the FBI.
Well, thanks, Prudence, for the time, and all glory be to God for the victory. And, well, the reason that we're going to pursue justice in this way is because the government and the Department of Justice, FBI, need to be held accountable. And they need to know that they cannot discriminate based upon viewpoint, and that's really what was the issue here, is that because I was a pro-lifer, because it is post Roe v. Wade, all that they came after me in an overly aggressive way. We agreed that we would come into the city of Philadelphia to present ourselves should we be indicted. And there was no need to put my children in danger. There was no need to intimidate, humiliate, and scare, potentially harm my children and terrorize my family.
Sure. And Mark, I want to focus on what you said to those agents that morning before they arrested you. You said, "I know why you're here. You're here because I rescue babies." Mark, why have you chosen these abortion mills as your battlefield?
Well, it's the primary battlefield of the day, if we can use that terminology. It's a fight that is the most important, and we engage in that battle in a spiritual way. It's a spiritual fight, and we know that there's powers and principalities involved in the evil of abortion, and so we take our weapon, our rosary, our prayers, and our fasting, and our charisms to help women and men in a difficult situation. And so all life and everything begins with in the womb. So if we don't get that right, we're all in danger. And so we have to begin there as the primordial battle of the day.
Yeah. And Mark, I'm sure it's not easy to think back on this, but would you share with me and our viewers how those FBI agents treated you after the arrest, once they had taken you into custody?
Sure, happy to do it. The journey was a difficult one, but we rejoiced in the trial and the persecution. So I was taken to the federal building in Philadelphia, about 100 yards away from Independence Hall, where our rights were established. And so when I got to to the federal building, I was shackled in my belly, shackled in my feet, and chained to a table for 6+ hours. I don't know if that's normal standard procedure or not. Doesn't seem to be, but nonetheless, we'll be learning more about that over the coming months. And then I was transferred to the U.S. Marshals in the same fashion, shackled. When they were at my house, they didn't allow me to put any clothes on. They didn't allow me to get socks on. They didn't allow me to say goodbye to my wife and my children. It was done in a way to humiliate, as I said, intimidate, and instill fear, and especially in fear in pro-life America.
So shocking what you went through. Thank you for sharing it with us. And Mark, I know you were here in D.C. this week and attended President Biden's State of the Union speech. What were your thoughts on it? And do you have plans to return to our nation's capital and keep working with members of Congress to share your story?
Sure. So we met many last night, and there's many people who apologized. Many of the congressmen and women that I met apologized. That meant a lot. We will be interviewing with the Judiciary Committee that is in charge of the oversight for the weaponization of the FBI and the overreach of the government on February 22nd. So I will be in the process of interviewing so that we can move towards testimony before a larger committee that would consist of both Democrats and Republicans asking questions. And so we're hopeful that will happen, that we'll get that opportunity to shed light, to really share the information that needs to be heard. And God willing, with a good civil rights attorney, we can move towards the process of exposing this injustice.
Well, Mark, we're so grateful for your powerful and courageous witness. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you. Mark Houck, pro-life activist.
God bless you. Thank you.